Welcome, everyone. My name is Charles Vermoen, and I'm very excited to be with you all. I'll be introducing our speakers and panelists in a second, but I just wanted to briefly welcome you, Jill, and you, Werner. Very excited to be with you. Uh, in terms of introduction and background, I'm very excited to be with you all. This is one of our larger events of the year with Activity Strong. So I'll give you a little bit of background on Activity Strong and the event itself. As some of you know, Activity Strong was this initiative started in 2020 in partnership between Link Senior, NAP, NCAP, and Activity Connection, with the sole goal to acknowledge the amazing work of activities and life enrichment professionals, but also to empower them and educate them and really nurture what we believe to be one of the essential part of senior living, which is the experience we help provide and build with our residents. The background on today's topic, on today's gathering, comes from a lot of different avenues. But I would say that one of the fundamental and most inspiring figures that I've had the pleasure to know is Jill Vitale-Austin. So I'm really inspired to have you, Jill, today. I'm very happy. We'll probably be sharing a lot about your work, but obviously you and Christian Living have coined the term of citizenship in senior living, and we'll get into that in our first session. So the main focus today is we're going to be talking about how we create places of belonging, right? Belonging in senior living, and going from vision to operations. As a reminder, this event is one of our gatherings, so it's a larger event. There are 3 sessions, and there will be breaks between each session. As a quick reminder or brief update or announcement, I should say, sorry, as we continue our merger of Link Senior and LifeLoop, I want to share that the resources under Activity Strong that many of you have been using through the years are here to stay, which is a great thing, obviously, but we'll be merging that under the lifeloop.com website momentarily. A little bit of background about myself. Again, my name is Charles. I was the CEO and co-founder of a Link Senior, a company that I started almost 17 years ago. And probably notable was that very early in the years of Link Senior, I got certified as an activity director. And through my work at Link Senior, I really became passionate about dementia. With a group of friends, we call ourselves, quote unquote, #dementia nerds. So there's really of love and really thinking about how we build experiences for everyone, including people living with cognitive change. And I think important to this discussion today, I believe that, quote unquote, old people are cool. So this is something that we've developed. As some of you know, we're very excited because Link Senior was acquired and is been merging with LifeLoop over the summer. So LifeLoop is an amazing organization, the combination of It's Never Too Late and LifeLoop that merged together 2 years ago, and now has built the largest and most comprehensive senior living resident experience platform. As you can see, some of these metrics are truly astounding. A couple of things that I love to hear and see as I continue working with LifeLoop is that more than 85% of our customers recommend us. And very exciting to share that this year we won the McKnight Innovation of the Year Award, the gold winner from the McKnight. So that's a little bit about LifeLoop. At its core, LifeLoop and Link Senior, in terms of intent and vision, are very, very similar. It is all about helping resident life to the fullest. So how can we enhance the resident experience, the staff experience, and obviously include a very important stakeholder, which is the family member. So a lot of great results, and happy to share that some of this we'll get into much detail during the first break with Lydia, our lead researcher. And also, one thing that's important in terms of the differences between Link Senior and LifeLoop is that as we incorporate all of these values and ideas and modules, it's really on 4 basic pillars, which is the IN to our content, the piece about communication, the performance trends, and more the operation and management. Again, providing the most comprehensive solution for senior living for resident experience. Now, let's get into the session. So just before we get started in the session itself, just a few housekeeping reminders. So we can earn up to 3 NAB, NCAP, NCTRC, and/or NCCDPC credit. To earn the credit, you need to be in 1 full session or up to 3 full sessions and fill in the survey, the CU survey, no later than midnight on Sunday, December 8th. Again, we'll be issuing these by emails. Please bear with us throughout the whole of next week until December 9th. But if you have any questions, as always, please reach out to webinars with an S, webinars@linksenior.com. This session is being recorded, so we would love you to consider, listening in the future. If you loved it, sharing it with your friends or colleagues. And then again, this will be available on the updates on the lifeloop.com website. Couple of things that sometimes people forget is we use both the chat and the Q&A of Zoom. If you have something specific for our panelists or speakers, please use the Q&A. And the chat, if you want everyone to see your very valuable contribution, make sure that you select everyone in the drop-down. And then the final one is really important to me and us is have fun. Thank you for what you do every single day. Obviously, a lot of importance is attached to this, and obviously the first session is going to speak a lot to that. So with that, love to welcome again and thank you for being with us. We're going to talk now about how we create true belonging in senior living and how we think of our different stakeholders, including residents, how they become from customers to citizens. So Jill Vitale, awesome, is the CEO of Christian Living Communities. Verna Cavey is the resident, actually a resident of Christian Living Communities. Both welcome. I'd love you to maybe start by introducing yourself. And if Verna, you want to start, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Hi, I'm Verna. Jill and I are coming to you from Denver. To give you a context, I am looking out at the snowy Rocky Mountains outside my window, but it is a sunny 60-degree day in Denver, so join me at my dining room table. I'm delighted to be able to share this conversation with you. By way of introduction, let's see. We're coming to the end of another year, aren't we? And I'm entering 25. I will soon be 77, have retired for 15 years, have lived and worked as a volunteer at Claremont for, I guess, 11-ish years. I didn't begin at Claremont. I started in a traditional place, hierarchy, rules and regs, telling you where to sit for dinner and who to sit with. They were the professionals. They knew best how we should be treated. This worked for a couple of years. By the 3rd year, I was beginning to decline, and my doctor took me out of there. And good people recommended Claremont to me. Claremont at that time was so unique. And quickly, very quickly, I was empowered and encouraged, and I was teaching and initiating programming. And before I knew it, again, with their encouragement, I was going across country with team members and leadership presenting about this amazing community. So one of the reasons I'm talking to you right now is that it changed my life. It really, really did. And, psychologists tell us, interestingly enough, that between the ages of 65 and 79, people self-report to be their happiest. And honest to God, I'm right there. I am flying. So the sense of belonging and being engaged, fully engaged in a community is why I'm here and hope to have a conversation with you. Jill.
Thank you, Verna. I always tell people, when I talk to people, sometimes even in other countries, they're like, "Oh, do you know Verna?" I was just on a Zoom call with her. She was teaching us about the culture at Claremont Park. And it's, Verna, you're making a huge impact on the world. So thank you for all that you do. I'm Jill, and I have the great honor of serving as the CEO at Christian Living Community. So we're a nonprofit, as Verna said, based in Denver. We have 8 communities and home care, all in Colorado. And just as we frame this discussion, so we've got life plan communities, we have assisted living communities, we have affordable housing, we have a little more expensive life plan, we have rental options, skilled nursing, assisted living. We basically do it all. So what Verna and I are going to talk about today applies everywhere. It really does. And so I've had about 30 years experience in this field. I started years ago in what we used to call dietary back in high school. And after grad school, I ended up being a nursing home administrator and have spent my whole career leading communities and spent 2.5 years leading the Eden Alternative. And you'll get to hear from some folks from the Eden Alternative later today. I started with Christian Living Communities at Claremont Park, where Verna lives. It was actually the birthplace of It's Never Too Late, which is now Life Loop. That was the first community where It's Never Too Late even had their technology there. So it's kind of cool to come full circle with all this. So, I guess when I think about my story, I went to a master's program at a hotel school. And for so many years, I led communities thinking that they were resorts or hotels, and people were customers, and our job was to serve people. And I didn't really understand. It took me a long time to understand that approach was misguided and that we really need to be focusing on building real communities. I started to see over the years how people living with dementia can be ostracized and marginalized, and how we as providers set up the real segregation of people based on their care needs, and started to see the damage that was being done to people, right? Belonging is a human need. And so I really started to see those challenges and really started to study community building. And as Charles said, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but that's how we really started thinking about when we get older, we shouldn't aspire to be customers, right? We need to be citizens and experience the things we need to live a long and healthy life. So I'm thrilled to be here with all of you today. And thank you all for the work that you do. As Charles said, you're world makers and world changers. And so thank you for all that you do.
Thanks, Jill. Jill, I have a little secret to share, which is, do you know why we're all here? It's because of Verna. Like Verna, I mean, one of the reasons I should say, but Verna, I think, attended one of our webinars early in the summer and actually sent us an email saying, hey, I'd love to speak to somebody about something. And actually, I connected with Verna. Well, I think it was, I'm looking at my email now, I think it was very early, late June or early July. But that Verna is one of the reasons why we're all here together. And Verna, thank you very much for reaching out and starting this conversation. So thank you both for your introduction. In terms of conversation, laying out the few blocks, what we thought about doing was talking a little bit about the vision. What's the ideal state for the concepts we're speaking about? So that's going to be session part 1. Part 2 is we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges, like why is it hard? What's blocking us right now? And then we'll get into what are we doing to address these, right? So that's going to be the third part. So let's get started with, let's try to paint for the audience, because you both live that in your mind daily. And there are obviously places that are trying to get there, and there are places that maybe have never heard about it. So starting from there, and maybe Jill, if you can give the point of view of the operator, could you paint us the picture maybe of your story of how you got there, and what's your dream world like? What does it look and feel like?
When this all really started to crystallize for me was when I was at Claremont Park.
Mm-hmm.
And this was years ago. It was a very nice community. But there was segregation of people who needed different levels of care. There were cliques that were happening in different parts of the community. I heard from people, well, you know, this person shouldn't live here anymore because they're confused. That why are you letting so many people move in here with walkers and wheelchairs? I don't want to live with old people. And you really start to when you really dig into it and really understand the harm that it does to human beings to be ostracized, to be marginalized, even if everything's with best intentions, you really realize that there's work that has to be done. And so what we really started doing again is looking at how do we build community? And that's what this is really all about. And Dr. Bill Thomas, the founder of the Eden Alternative, says aging is a team sport. And I agree with that. And I'd say, you know, living is a team sport. And none of us, as much as we want to say we're independent, none of us are independent. We're all interdependent and we need each other. And so when I look at that transformation, and we can talk a little bit more about this, how do you really start to move things forward? The vision that was created with the residents at Claremont Park and the team members at Claremont Park was a community where everyone, no matter what their cognitive abilities are, no matter what their physical abilities are, and you go so far as no matter what someone's identity is, that you can find true belonging in this community, and that people are honored and included. And it wasn't easy, but I'll tell you that one of the most important things that we did, and I didn't understand what we were doing at the time, is we asked a lot of questions. So, and that's the key, right? What kind of community do we want this to be? And I will tell you that in all the hundreds of people that I've talked to, nobody ever said, well, I want this to be a place where if somebody's living with dementia, they feel like they don't belong here. Or I want somebody new moving in to feel like they don't have any friends. No, people want, and they express this, that I want this to be a place where everyone can experience love and true belonging here. And so that's really what it's about. And you don't get there by treating people like customers, right? You have to engage people in being part of the solution and creating positive norms.
Thank you, Jill. So many things to share. One thing I'd love the audience to maybe consider is that Jill actually wrote an amazing book that I've been recommending for years, and I'm going to place the link in the chat. And Jill didn't ask me to do this. It's myself. I really recommend. It's one of my top 3 books that I recommend for the future of senior living. But it talks so well about belonging. Jill, what I love about what you just said is when you think about it, belonging is something that people always want more of, right? That's always we always want more belonging, regardless of where we are, who we are, and what's blocking us. So really, really love that. Verna, I'd love to hear a little bit about how does it feel for you? You're a resident, right? For many organizations out there, you're just a consumer, but in this great organization, Christian Living Communities, you're more than that, right? You're a citizen. How does that feel? And what, yeah, like, and actually, how did you get here, Verna? Like, just tell us about your own journey, if you don't mind.
Sure, Charles. Understand first that everyone that you start at a person-centered, as a person-centered community, and then you grow from there. And so I then was involved in a resident-directed community, and that's where residents try to understand their needs and to fulfill them and to collaborate with our team members and leadership for that to happen. That's very empowering. Oh my gosh, when you're working with them as colleagues, it's pretty amazing. So that end of things is, what is your best self? What is your purpose and your passion? That is just so exciting. And then, as if that wasn't enough, then we moved up to the citizenship model. And there you expand your thinking. It's not just your needs, but it's the needs of your community and all your neighbors. And that's pretty exciting too. Jill and I just worked together to get a resident scholarship fund moving. And that is a situation where residents go out into the world, pick up a piece of education, take a course, go to a conference, and then come back and share that with their neighbors. And it's just a wonderful concept. Then, as far as my passion goes, I have to admit, I really enjoy going to the conferences, making those connections. And I have to admit, a lot of what we do as residents is taking some of the weight off of our colleagues, our team members in leadership. So I go to the conferences and then I come back and share that information. A wonderful example is during COVID, I went to a conference. It was virtual, obviously. And it was with World Health Organization, Hopkins, and any number of wonderful groups. And I was able to just literally pick up from that conference to bring information immediately to CLC, Christian Living Communities, and to Claremont. So to be able to attend, make social connections, bring those gifts back to residents is pretty joyful. So, well, and the fact is I'm having a blast, so it is a passion, and it's pretty fabulous. So yeah, that's what's happening on my end.
And I think one of the things that Verna said that's a key point here is, and I should also mention, the foundation of all this is the Eden Alternative Principles. So that's how we got everything started. So that's really the foundation of our culture, is the Eden Alternative Principles. But one of the things Verna said is moving from this place of which sometimes, with person-directed care and that kind of model, it's all about, here's how I want to live my life. And that's great. And that's a great step on this journey. But what Verna said is really key. And it's, if you're really going to be a citizen, you have responsibilities as well as rights. Yep. And you're not just looking out for what's good for me, you're looking out for what's good for everybody that lives in this community, our team members in the community. And I'll tell you, when people start thinking that way, it's incredible what starts to happen and the way things start to shift. It's pretty awesome.
That was actually one of my questions for both of you. I mean, obviously what you're doing is hard, but I'm sure it's rewarding on a daily basis. I'd like to start with Verna, but Joe, I'd love to get your answer as well. When you talk to your peers that are not within Christian Living, right? So Verna, when you speak to other people of your age that maybe live in other communities, I guess, how does the conversation go? Like, I'm sure it might be different. What does that sound like in terms of conversation?
I'm always surprised because I've grown so comfortable and so happy in this environment. And when I go to present, the surprise when you talk to people is, nationally, I got a lot, oh no, that's not happening. If that happened, if you had resident directed communities, you would be herding cats. It would be chaos. It can't happen. No, I'm living. It's happening, So, and then internationally, people were just stunned. It's just so interesting that I accept it as my everyday life, but I'm still realizing that it's pretty unique and pretty wonderful.
Yeah. Joe, how about you? How does it feel?
I think when I first wrote that book, it was published in 2019. I was like, oof, I'm going to make a lot of people mad, right? Because I wrote a lot of things that were kind of blasphemous almost at that time. And now I feel like the field is in a little bit of a different place. I'll tell you, from a formal leadership role, you have to, who has to change first to make this happen is you, right? If you are in a leadership role, if you're the director of community life, or you're the executive director or the administrator or a team member, you've got to give up control, right? And community building, sometimes it is like herding cats, but it comes with time of how do you make your community's messy. So anybody out there, like, we know that it's messy in our neighborhoods where we live. It's messy if you're on a, PTA or whatever it might be. Community's messy, and that's just the way it is. So I think accepting that and understanding that going in is really important. But it can be challenging if you go in thinking, I am the manager here and people will do what I tell them to do. You're going to have some challenges. And I think with the changes that we're seeing in society and what residents are wanting and our future residents are wanting, that's not going to fly anymore. So I think this is in exact alignment with where we need to go to meet what people want.
I love that you both talk about friction the same, but a little bit differently. Maybe it's what we call like the good trouble. It's the good disruption that we want to have. Yeah, I mean, seriously, but it all comes from this fundamental aspect, which is, that I learned through DAA, which is our second session today, years ago, which is nothing about us without us, right? Like including the person is the only way to go. Great. Love these thoughts. Let's get into like the challenges, right? Because you kind of alluded to that a little bit, Jill, which is the friction and so on and so forth. So, obviously every human being, regardless of whatever, wants to belong, right? That's a great state. And you alluded to, we want safety, we want control, blah, 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 all of that. Let's get into what we feel is challenging us from progressing today. And, maybe Jill, we can start by you and then go to Werner. So just a few thoughts about what's blocking us, what's the challenge?
Well, I'd love for people who are out there that are part of this webinar to put in the chat box too what you see the challenges are. I think that would be amazing for you all to share. What are some of the reasons maybe that any roadblocks you're coming up against? Management is the biggest challenge. Well, there you go. That can definitely be the case. And, I think that makes a lot administration. Yeah. So that's really interesting. Corporate ideals. Yeah. So people like me can sometimes be part of the problem. And I absolutely see that. And it is really, people come into these roles sometimes with these preconceived notions, and somebody taught you how you're supposed to be an administrator or a, CEO or whatever it might be. And I think there's work that has to be done. When I said that leaders have to grow first, that is very true, right? We absolutely have to do that. We have to learn how to be community builders. And that is not part of the education that we get. We get taught how to manage things, but if we can start bringing more, how do you really build community into things, that'll help. I think some of the other challenges are ageism. I mean, this was my big aha moment as a leader, is like, holy cow, we are bombarded with ageist messages all the time. And what is aging, and aging's decline, and aging's dependence? And we build and operate communities through that flawed lens. And so that's another big issue, is just the way we think about older people. And then as we grow old, what are the beliefs we have about ourselves?
Yeah.
What do you mean I can have an influence here? What do you mean that you want me to learn something new? Because we are taught that we can't do that. So ageism is a huge, nothing's a real barrier, right? But it's something we've got to address. And then people really learning how do we become community builders, I think, is essential. And Verna, I want you to jump in here. What else are you seeing?
Well, let me add to your question for everyone. When I'm presenting, I often want to know what you're thinking. Are you thinking, well, maybe this works for certain independent living residents, but what about assisted living? What about memory care? Can you do it there? And so, yeah, let us know what your concerns are, if you want to put that in there as well. If you're proud of a program that you've developed and it's really working, let us know about that as well. One challenge I want to mention is it takes a lot of hard work and time to create a culture in a community. And what we sometimes forget is you have to sustain it, and you have to be vigilant. I mean, you bring in a different leader, and it is shocking shocking how fast you can lose that community. And it's heartbreaking. So keep your eyes open, really care about the people that you're bringing in, that you're on the same page in belief systems, that they really care, that they're really authentic. And also, don't be afraid to put a really sharp, perceptive resident on your search committees when you're looking for these good people. So
Oh, yeah, that's essential, I think. I want to, there are a couple comments in here, about memory support. And I think, having Dementia Action Alliance here, I know Lori's here and Meredith is going to present with her. What an organization. And there's so much when you think about ageism, there's also, we usually talk about it with ableism, right? So prejudice and these assumptions you make about people who are living with different abilities, that gets in the way too. So you've got the right people here in this session today with Dementia Action Alliance to help really shift that thinking, because the stigma around dementia is incredibly damaging to people. And I don't know. I think some of these challenges, I wonder sometimes. There's also some comments about regulations, and I'm curious. I don't know about regulations that get in the way of creating belonging. I know regulations can be challenging, but I think sometimes we need to ask a little more questions. Is regulations really getting in the way of driving this change, or is it sometimes our perception of that? So I don't know. I know it's hard, but I'll tell you that building community is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but it's also one of the most rewarding things you can do. So I encourage you to keep pushing through those barriers. And you know what? If you've got a leader in your organization that you feel is like stopping things from moving, then see how you can start to put some education in front of that person. Hey, let's do some eating alternative training, or hey, watch this webinar with Charles and the gang. Those kinds of things.
One thing to, just as I'm sitting here and listening to you both, I think it's important to be reminded that it's not like you need to go through 95 levels and then unlock the belonging level. Like all of us, one way or the other, we're doing belonging. Even if you think you're the worst in the country in that topic, you're probably somewhere beyond zero, because the minute you start to talk to your resident and listen to them, that creates belonging. I think the ideal here is true belonging, like true belonging from, Sorry, Joe, you wanted to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, there's a saying that all transformation starts with conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. And even in the way that we normally do our work and the things that we do, we can start to have conversations. And as leaders, and somebody put this in the chat, our job is not to have the answers. Our job is to ask the right questions. And that is how we transformed Claremont Park, and how that community continues to transform. It's way better now than when I was there, because Verna and everybody there keeps making those things change. But asking people questions, like again, what kind of community do we want this to be? How do we want people living with dementia to experience this community? And then a follow-up question is, what are we doing right now that's getting in the way of that? And what are we doing right now that's working? And you don't have to get everybody in the community on board with it all at once, right? Think about the theory of diffusion of innovation. You need to find your people that are like, yeah, let's do this. And you start to change things little by little.
Verna, anything you want to add to this?
ageism?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Give me a minute. The first thing is, for myself, we have to identify internalized ageism. It's natural. We grew up with it. We all grew up with it. We were socialized into stereotypes. So, if there's, okay, I have to confess it and admit it. Some of you know what I'm talking about. If I'm rushing off to a meeting and there's this old lady on a walker and I'm trying to get past, you go to the right, you go to the left. And I just have to stop myself and just say, stop. That's going to be you in a few years. And she's doing the best she can.
Mhm.
And you have no right to reduce her dignity in any way, to make her feel less. And so I tried to stop and make that human connection with her, and let her know that she's valued. And then I can go on to my meeting. The other thing is, and I'll try to make this short, is I get mad, Charles. I get mad, everybody. I'm sorry. But there's commercials on television that tell you about how disgusting you are with your wrinkles and what is it, the little waddle and the crepiness. And it's like, I just say, what right have you? How dare you speak to me like that? These wrinkles are me. They're my life. They're my laughter. They're my
Yeah.
tears. Don't tell me I should be ashamed of them. And the other thing, okay, the little crappy thing. It's like, this is a natural developmental stage in it, and I'm loving it. Do not reduce me. Do not tell me I'm repugnant because I'm older. So yeah, I get mad.
I
And
love it.
Verna, you all talk about, I mean, you talk about this at the community, right? I'm curious if the organizations that are out there, have you started to dig into ageism with the residents and team members at your communities? I think that's a key, is to really start, awareness is the first thing, right? I mean, because there's a time where people just accepted all that
Yeah.
nonsense. And so Verna, you saying how dare you is being aware of those negative messages, which then can start to impact things.
The truth, Jill, is our people are so busy here, they can't be bothered with the stupidity. I mean, they're just like, go away. I have things to do. And I think that's part of it. If you have your purpose, your passion, and you're fully engaged, then you don't, it's like, this is ridiculous. This is who I am, and I'm proud, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
So don't reduce me.
Just a couple of thoughts as we speak, Verna. Like, I'm sure you know this. We have this old
Yeah.
people are cool, and yeah. So there are a lot of smiles when I hear you talk. But the one thing, just to tag on ageism, an important thing here is that, Verna, when I first connected with you, I can't tell you how much I loved how vulnerable you were when we started to talk about dementia, right? There's this question that I love, which is, if I had dementia, why would you treat me differently? Would you treat me differently, and why? And you were very quick to admit, well, this is something that we're struggling with. We want to build further. And in this question that Jill just asked you, I mean, I'm sure that, and I hear that many times the friction is between residents, right? Like, how do we educate even the residents to residents interaction? So I don't know if you have additional thoughts on that, but I know this is one area where we can all learn.
My response to friction is yes, there's sometimes we talk about ageism, and residents really don't want to hear it. They just, I don't know why. I don't know if they think it's real or not, or if they want to spend their time on it. But that's the only friction I see. There's a kind of denial that
Yeah.
it's happening and it doesn't affect me.
And I'm curious, Jill, when you think about, I guess the hundreds, of not thousands, of life that you, in a way, bear the responsibility. Like, how do you think on a macro level about these friction? And it's not only, I mean, resident to resident, but also staff and resident. Like, how do you think about it?
With people who might have internalized ageism or hold.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It's person by person, truly. And I remember when we first started doing this work, and I hope at Claremont Park now it's kind of like, well, of course we do things this way. But when we first started doing this work, I remember we used to segregate the people in the health suites, which is the nursing home, and segregate people from the assisted living. And we were just like, guess what? We have programs that everybody Anybody who's interested can come. And I remember people being like, why are all these wheelchairs here? Why are these people
Yeah,
here?
you talk about this in your book.
Right.
So
And
well.
so
Yeah.
those kinds of things were happening at that time. But the more we started having those conversations, and again, using learning circles, Eden Alternative Tool, and talking about how do we want this community to be? How do we want people to feel? Residents started educating each other. And it's those having those norms. We all have norms. Anywhere we go, there are norms, right?
Mhm.
When you go to church, there are certain norms and there's different norms. You go to the grocery store, you stand in line, you don't just butt in line. And when you start to, in a community, create this environment where people create these norms for this is how we behave here, and the way we act here is we honor and include people no matter what their abilities are, and we are all one community. When
Yeah.
somebody new moves in, this is what I've seen anyway, or somebody's kind of being a little bit jerky, somebody's going to pull them aside and say, well, that's how we do things here, and let's talk about this a little bit, because that's not okay. And that is so much more powerful than somebody coming to the executive director, and then the executive director pulls out their policy on bullying. And like, that when you have good community norms, you don't have to do all those things. And the other thing I would just say is you can't let people be cruel to each other. So if there are things that are going on, like one or two people can ruin a culture. And so they have to be addressed, ideally through with peers and friends. But sometimes you do have to step in and say, that's not okay. And this isn't the kind of
So I
community.
think so one thing that's important, I just want to tag that is person by person, like you started explaining, but also you ended with, I think something really important is being very quick and sharp to respond to unwanted behaviors, right? Okay.
And talking to people before they move in about it.
Mhm.
You know, we tour, there are a lot of places that won't show somebody a nursing home when they come to look at a community. And that's not because it scares people, but we pretty much are like, listen, this is our community. And if you need to live here someday, you're going to be included. And so it starts in the very beginning and talking to people before they even move in. Like, this is a culture of inclusion and kindness and caring. And maybe this isn't, it might not be the right place for everyone.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I want to tag one element here because I know we're also running a business, right? I mean, I know your organization is not a nonprofit, but you know, there's obviously and so the marketing part has to be there. And so, Jill, but Verna, I also want to hear your perspective on that. Jill, how much is this culture of belonging a marketing asset compared to other communities in your neighborhood?
It's the belonging piece. It's also that, so in addition to how do we want to behave with each other, we'd ask people, what gifts and talents do you have that you want to bring to this community to make it stronger and better? You don't get asked that other places, right? And what do you want to learn next? Not just, here are all the things we're going to do for you. I would say that it is definitely a marketing advantage. Our communities are full with waiting lists. And, you know, when we were doing this transformation at Claremont Park years ago, we were opening a new neighborhood of Life Plan apartment homes, and we far exceeded any of the fill-up projections. We were 99% occupied within a year. And so people wanted it. And there are some people that might say, no, that's not for me. And that's okay. But we have seen it as a great advantage because people want something different.
Yeah. Werner, for you, you know, obviously you're on national, international stages talking about this. Obviously, this benefits in a way your community, right? Like where you belong, but also the business, Christian Living Communities, potentially benefits from this. How does it feel to be the voice? I mean, I'm sure it feels good, but like, tell us about the impact you feel you have in the business of the community you live in.
Well, first, let me just jump on to what Jill just said. I love going to a conference with her because inevitably, after we go to questions and answers, there's somebody in the back that raises their hand and says, okay, enough of the feely and touchy. What's the bottom line?
Exactly.
she'll
And that's
just
what I'm trying to get to. Yeah. Yeah.
And she just whips out those statistics, and they're like, their face just falls and they just sit quietly back down again. It's like, no, you can be humane and compassionate and still run a really good business too. So that's what I've learned. What else? Sure.
When you think about it, obviously it's my belief now, but there is no better sales argument than true belonging, right? I mean, I can't think of anything superior, anything that money can buy that gets more belonging. There's no better value proposition. So
Yeah.
I think that's what we're hearing here.
Yeah.
And obviously glad to, hear, which I knew already, the fact that you want a waiting list and so on and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is, the traditional model of senior living, the penetration rate's like 12%. So 88% of people are like, you can't drag me to one of those places.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is the traditional way is not appealing to people, right? But when you look at what people want and what you need to live a long and healthy life, belonging is a key part of that.
Yep.
And I wanted to Cameo, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, put a comment in about teaching residents about dementia symptoms, communication, how to be a good neighbor to somebody living with dementia. That's awesome. And I think the more we can do some of those things in communities, to give people the tools they need to be a good supportive neighbor, like, thank you. That's really cool that you're doing that.
I want to tag one thing, Jill, that you said, because it's a very important one. Obviously, this benefits Christian living communities, but it also benefits the industry. And I want to explain something just in case, just to make sure everyone understands it. What Joe was referring to in terms of 12% penetration is when you look at a market, right, like a zip code, for example, and you look at the amount of population that could live in senior living, what is the percentage of that population that actually lives in senior living, right? So if I have a retirement community here and I look at all the older adults that could live with me, what's the percentage of residents that actually live in a community? And 12%, when you think about it, is low, right? It does indicate that 88% aren't living in the communities. And so what Jill was referring to is the fact that there's a lot of more room to grow. And probably one of the best ways is to help grow belonging so that people actually want to live like Verna, basically. Did I explain that correctly?
Yeah, thank you for explaining that, Charles. And I look at those other 88% and you look at all the studies that say that, the vast majority of people say, I'm never moving into a community. And a lot of times, sometimes it works for people, but so many times there are people that end up isolated. I'm so concerned about this aging in place is the answer for everyone, because so many people end up isolated and really in a really bad situation, because that really impacts your health. And so I think the more we can do to question what our model is and is the way we've always been doing it, the way we should do it, the more opportunity we have to keep our communities full and then also impact the lives of people, because there are so many people out there that could benefit from living in our communities.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Charles.
No, please go ahead, Vanna.
I think about that a lot, and about the aging in place, and that really does seem to be the future. People can't afford, many of them, to come into these communities. But these ideas that we're talking about are universal as far as purpose and meaning and just the dignity of a human being. They transfer beautifully. You don't have to be in a particular spot or a particular community. They transfer beautifully. I mean, it really is there. It's universal thinking.
Yeah. Thank you, Verna. I had a quick story to share, and then I want to use that to ask you a question, Verna, which is that very close to my house, there's the CEO of a nonprofit who invited me to just have a quick conversation. He's new on the job, and he was asking about the upcoming trends in the industry. So I shared Jill's book, and he invited me again with a resident who's actually on their board, which is a good sign. But they
Mhm.
were both curious on how do we enable this model of citizenship. And so, we started talking about dementia and so on and so forth. And so they asked me, well, could you put me in touch with somebody who does it right? And I said, yeah, I'm happy to, but maybe you can also talk to people that might be interested in this. And they were like, yeah, put us in touch. And I was like, but we were sitting in a large dining area. And I said, well, why didn't you talk to people living with dementia? And same thing. They said, well, can you put us in touch? And I went, well, maybe there are some here, right? And the resident, she her head went down like this, and then she circled around in the room, and she turned to me and she said, "Oh yes, we have some." And my point being that as you both been iterating, often it's just a matter of conversation, right? It's just talking. So I guess my question to you, Verna, is think about that particular resident I was talking to, or maybe we have residents on the line, or maybe here today we have staff professionals that are working with residents. What would be your question or your advice to start this conversation between the residents and the staff, or the residents and the residents? What is the first question you would recommend they ask?
Well, everything starts with person-centered.
Mhm.
We can't go anywhere without that. And one of the things at Claremont is that we all know each other's stories. And that means team members and staff as well, and leadership. We know where they've been, we know their struggles, we know when the babies cried all night, and so on and so forth. So knowing each other, their strengths, their gifts, and maybe some of their weaknesses too, I think that's a beautiful starting place. And then we can move on and advance. Without that, we have nothing. So I don't know that that's answering your question, Charles. Maybe you can prompt me a little bit more.
I think you kind of answered, which is two things: being curious about others and acting as a normal neighbor in a way, like just as a community, any type of community. Yeah. I guess maybe the question would be, if we want to focus on this idea of dementia, for example,
Oh, sure.
yeah, like what would you challenge people to do about it, or what? Yeah.
Right. This is my life learning right now. I'm going to sessions. CLC has been providing it, sessions with practitioners and experts and people who have dementia, who sit down and talk to us and say, this is the journey I'm on. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I need from you. And we need that education. And I try to find models around me. I was telling Jill the other day, I was sitting in the patio, beautiful day, and a very young aide with a very old man in a wheelchair with cognitive decline. And I just listened to her, and she said, "It is such a gorgeous day. Can you feel the sun on your shoulders?" And she said, what do you want to do? We can go right and see the goldfinches at the bird feeder. We can go left. We can go to the garden." And she gave him a couple other options. And she said, "What do you want to do?" And he mumbled something which I could not understand, but she did. And off they went to the garden. And I thought, oh my gosh, talk about a human connection. Talk about understanding and allowing the dignity of that man. And it just to look for those models around me. They're there. We just have to find them. So I'm educating myself. I'm looking for models. I'm trying different ways to be supportive to the people in memory care.
I love that. Jill, what your perspective on this?
I want to make sure I go back to your original question.
Question is, how do you prompt people to improve on this? Like, what's the question they should ask themselves, ask the team members, after this session today?
I would ask how are we doing right now? And one of the, and this is an Eden alternative tool, is putting signs up on the wall, like we're super inclusive and a really warm culture all the way to freezing cold, and we don't have that. And you ask people to line up on the wall. And I'll tell you what's fascinating about that. It doesn't always turn out the way you think it's going to. And you can see the different perspectives of different people. Like a residents might have a different perspective than your team members.
Yeah.
Leaders, sometimes we think we're doing great, but then you watch and you see what's going on. And so like something even like that can start the conversation. And I think the other thing is if I were to have a dementia diagnosis, how would I want to experience life here? Would I want to be locked away, never to see people again? Or would I want to be included in things? The other piece, I wrote a blog about this years ago, and it's just something to think about, is what would be different if kids got dementia?
Yeah.
Would we lock people?
Well, actually, I think you talk about
right?
this in your book. I think you mentioned that.
Well, I might have, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like there's ageism that creeps into all of this with dementia too.
Yeah.
So just because we've been doing things this certain way doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah.
And I think Dementia Action Alliance and the Eden Alternative are great guides in thinking through this differently. So
Yeah, and one of the many reasons I'm excited to have Lori and them on the second session, she actually just dropped a comment, reiterating this idea of nothing about us without us. Jill, I have to say that I love your idea of visually representing, like hot and cold or inclusive and just getting people to react to that. That's really cool. All right, we have 4 minutes left. So what I'd like to do just as we close, just allowing you to have like quote unquote closing remarks. So anything you'd like to share on this. And Ivana, I'd love to start with you and in 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll move to Jill, if you don't mind.
I think trying to get the point across about what a joy it is at this age, and that we have a right to quality of life like anyone else. And I meet people who tell me they're afraid to grow old, and it makes me so sad. It really makes me sad. And we need to be models. We need to express our joy. It's not perfect. I've got a lot of doctor appointments, but I had no idea that it would be this good. And I think we need to share that with people and support them and help them get past this negative concept of aging. And there's some beautiful literature that uses positive language and is very affirming. And I encourage people just to read and let that wrap around them a little bit, because it's a good life. It really is a good life.
Sure, sounds like it, Ivana. Thank you so much for these. Jill?
I would just encourage all of you out there to not just manage what is, but to lead to a new future, right? And no matter what your role is in your organization, you can make an impact. And so continue to seek out opportunities like this with Charles and these webinars that he does with the Eden Alternative, with Dementia Action Alliance. And, I just say like every day, try to challenge one of the ways that you think about things. If you're never encountering anything that makes you go, then you're not learning and growing, right? As humans, we always seek out things that validate what we already believe, but seek out things that are going to make you think a little bit differently. We've got a lot of work to do in this field, and I am so grateful that all of you are part of that work. So thank you.
Thank you to both of you. I profoundly believe that we just need more of both of you for the industry. Jill, I think that under your leadership, I'm sure your organization has grown, but what comes to mind hearing you talk is how grateful I am for you for senior living. Like senior living gets better with people with you around. So thank you for that. And I guess my closing word here is for you, Werner. Thank you very much for reaching out to me in July. Thank you very much for the work that you do. I mean, advocating for all these ideas. And you'll probably smile when I say this, but I really believe it. I'd love to be able to grow old like you.
Thank you.
Really, like you're inspiring, and I'm sure you're inspiring to this audience. And I'm sure that if there are residents in the audience today, they probably feel similarly. So thank you both for all the amazing work you do and for being such great human beings.
Thank you for the conversation, Charles.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. We really
Anytime.
appreciate it.
Anytime. Feel free to stay around. We're going to stop the recording, and obviously we'd love you to consider staying for the other session. Just turn off your camera, and we're going to move on. We're going to close the first session and the recording of the first session here.